Chapter 351. Three-Way Battle 1. Verdant eyes gleamed as Lucifer observed the battlefield. His god's eyes captured every nuance, every subtle shift in the combatants' stances. Arthur's movements have evolved, Lucifer thought, a smile playing at his lips. That liver kick against Jack was perfect. Not just the impact but the form itself. Full-body martial arts. Interesting. The air shimmered as Arthur's blade deflected a scorching blast from Jack. In response, dual vortices, one midnight black, one blinding white, swirled around Lucifer. Black mana and white mana, his full potential awakening. Can't hold back anymore, Lucifer decided, shifting into the opening stance of the myth of the northern peak. Before he could complete the sequence, the air around him darkened. Too slow, Arthur materialized beside him, sword forcing Lucifer's blade downward, shattering his stance. Lucifer's eyes widened as he channeled dual mana through his weapon to resist. But Arthur was already moving ahead. He abandoned his sword, leaving it pressing down with enhanced gravitational aura. In the split-second opening, Arthur launched a front kick. Lucifer read the movement with his enhanced sight and moved to block. A feint. Lucifer realized a little late, raising his hand to intercept the Brazilian kick. I blocked. He began to think as he thrust his sword toward Arthur's exposed side. Nice try, Arthur muttered as a brilliant flash of pure light crashed against Lucifer. Though he managed a shield of white mana, the impact hurled him backward. That pure light, it's Rachel's, Lucifer realized, spitting blood. His attention shifted to Jack, who advanced on Arthur with hands wreathed in writhing flames. Jack unleashed a barrage of fire spells, each more intense than the last. The air crackled as a spiraling column of white-hot flames twisted toward Arthur like a hungry serpent. Arthur pivoted with fluid precision. His blade sliced through Jack's spell, redirecting the blazing energy skyward where it erupted in a cascade of embers. Jack slammed both palms against the ground. A wave of flame rippled outward, encircling Arthur from all directions. A faint smile crossed Arthur's face. Luna's golden sigils flickered along his arms as he tapped into lucent harmony, his soul resonance borrowing Luna's mythic body. With a gesture that bent space itself, he compressed the flames, crushed them by drowning them with deep dark. Get out! Jack growled, barely dodging his own retaliatory strike. Lucifer seized the distraction, centering himself. The first movement of the myth of the northern peak, Winter's Ascent, crystallized the air as ice elementals formed at his command, spiraling upward in a protective barrier. His yin-yang body pulsed with dual energy, right side gleaming white, left side absorbing light. Within this cocoon, he prepared his next attack. The second movement of the myth of the northern peak, Northern Gale, sent ice shards outward as hurricane-force winds erupted from his position, targeting both opponents. Jack countered with a wall of flame that melted the projectiles. Arthur executed his Tempest dance, each movement increasing his momentum as he weaved between the frozen missiles, dodging some and destroying others, closing on Lucifer. Getting better, Arthur said, sword materializing back in his hand as gravity bent to his will. Still not enough. His God Flash movement carried him beyond Lucifer's enhanced vision. Lucifer reacted on instinct, channeling dual mana through his blade. The third movement of the myth of the northern peak, Frozen Zenith. Meanwhile, Arthur's sword was clad in blinding pure light. God Flash. The two movements met in a powerful clash, Lucifer being able to predict God Flash with his god's eyes. However, Arthur continued to advance towards Lucifer with his sword. A flurry of strikes followed, too swift to count. Lucifer blocked the first 10 strikes, parried the next 5, but the subsequent barrage overwhelmed even his god's eyes. Sword strikes mixed with palm strikes, elbow drives, and kicks in a seamless flow. He felt ribs crack. Blood splattered from his lips, but Lucifer lunged forward, his sword a gleaming arc. Arthur blocked, exactly as Lucifer anticipated. A feint of his own, and in the instant Arthur's guard was committed, Lucifer unleashed a barrage targeting pressure points across Arthur's body, limbs blurring with preternatural speed. Learned some new tricks too, Lucifer thought with satisfaction as his final strike connected with Arthur's sternum. But there was no impact, no reaction, no damage. Lucifer's eyes widened. Despite channeling enhanced aura into every blow, Arthur hadn't even flinched. The crimson bone armor gleamed across his form, while Luna's golden sigils pulsed beneath, visible even through the armor. What the hell is his body made of? Lucifer wondered, a cold realization creeping up his spine. Their exchange was interrupted by a blistering wave of heat as Jack returned. His body became a living conduit for flame, the white fire coating his form shifting hue, edges tinged with light gray hiding something deeper. Forgetting someone? Jack sneered, voice distorted by power. He directed concentrated flame toward Arthur, who raised a single hand wreathed in deep dark energy. The collision cratered the ground beneath them. Arthur stood unmoving, the deep dark absorbing Jack's flames, while the crimson armor remained unmarked. How the hell? Jack muttered. Lucifer saw his opportunity, weaving a complex pattern with his blade. Elemental convergence flowed through him as he simultaneously channeled water, fire, lightning, wind, earth, and ice into a single devastating attack. The elements spiraled around his blade, creating a prismatic edge humming with destructive potential. Try this on for size. Lucifer's eyes blazed as he executed the third movement of his art, Frozen Zenith. The area crystallized as reality itself seemed to freeze. Within this domain of absolute cold, Lucifer moved with unprecedented speed, unleashing 100 strikes between heartbeats. Each blow targeted a vital point, each slash meant to sever mana channels. Lucifer poured everything into this sequence, the culmination of his art. As the technique concluded, reality shuddered back to normal. Lucifer stood panting, sword extended, awaiting the result. Arthur stepped back, a single hairline crack on the crimson bone covering his left shoulder, the only evidence of Lucifer's onslaught. That was decent, Arthur said, examining the crack with mild interest. But this is getting boring. Got better things to do. Jack's laughter erupted as his flames intensified, the gray hue becoming more pronounced. The gray flames surged, revealing glimpses of absolute darkness within. You haven't seen anything yet, Jack growled, eyes reflecting twin voids as the abyssal flames strengthened his nirvana flames. The convergence of realms spell drew upon both flame sources simultaneously. The resulting conflagration twisted reality, distorting light as it hungered for more power. Instead of dismay, Lucifer felt his heart race with unexpected joy. This was what he'd been waiting for. Actual challenge. Real growth. About damn time things got interesting, Lucifer grinned, wrapping streams of white and black mana around his body into flowing enhanced aura armor. The energy crackled across his skin, a manifestation of his evolving potential. Where black and white met, a new power emerged, neither light nor dark but something transcendent. Arthur observed with calculating eyes, Luna's sigils now covering both arms entirely through his soul resonance gift. Fine, he shrugged, allowing Erebus to manifest fully. The crimson bone armor thickened, growing more elaborate as the Lich's power merged with Arthur's. Temporal distortion bent time and space around him as he executed God Flash. Eternal moment. His form blurred, simultaneously existing in multiple places, each instance perfectly poised to counter both opponents. Now we're talking, Arthur's voice echoed from multiple locations at once. The three warriors converged in a storm of movement and power. Jack's abyssal-enhanced flames matched Arthur's speed, leaving trails of distorted space. Lucifer moved like a shadow between light and darkness, his dual-mana armor deflecting devastating blows. They exchanged hundreds of strikes in mere seconds. Arthur's Tempest Dance reached its zenith, each movement flowing into the next with devastating precision. Jack unleashed increasingly complex fire constructs, the Nirvana flames empowered by abyssal flames creating attacks that consumed everything they touched. Lucifer combined his sword art with high circle spells, ice and lightning answering his call, as readily as the dual mana that comprised his essence. For precious moments they existed in perfect balance. 3 points of a triangle, each pushing the others higher. Arthur's crimson bone armor gleamed with each impact, Luna's golden sigils flashing beneath its surface through his soul resonance. Jack's gray flames roared with increasing intensity. And Lucifer, caught between these forces of nature, found himself evolving with each exchange, his god's eyes recording and adapting to every technique. As they separated after a particularly violent clash, a silent acknowledgement passed between them. This wasn't just fighting anymore, it was something more. 3 teenagers pushing beyond their known limits, ascending to heights few could comprehend. Jack breathed, his flames dancing with new intensity. "Not bad," Arthur acknowledged, a rare note of respect in his voice. Lucifer merely grinned, blood trickling from his mouth as his dual mana swirled even brighter. The battle of the top had only just begun. Chapter 352. Three-Way Battle 2. The battlefield transformed with each passing second. Where there had once been solid ground, now existed a fractured landscape of craters, ice formations, and smoldering patches where Jack's flames had scorched the earth beyond recognition. Arthur weaved through the destruction with fluid grace, his tempest dance having reached a state of perpetual momentum. The golden sigils of Luna burned like constellations beneath his crimson bone armor, each step leaving brief afterimages that disintegrated into motes of golden light. He no longer needed to think about movement. His body simply flowed from one position to the next, each motion setting up 3 subsequent attacks. A torrent of gray-tinged flames erupted from Jack's outstretched hands, spiraling into complex geometric patterns that hunted Arthur with predatory intelligence. The flames were changing, evolving with each casting as the hidden abyssal energy leaked through more prominently. The edges of his fire now curled with absolute darkness, consuming light itself where they passed. Between these 2 forces moved Lucifer, his dual-colored mana armor flickering as it absorbed repeated impacts. His god's eyes tracked everything, the subtle weight shifts in Arthur's footwork, the infinitesimal distortions in reality surrounding Jack's flames. But translating observation into action was becoming increasingly difficult. He parried Arthur's blade, redirecting its momentum while simultaneously casting a defensive ice barrier against Jack's approaching fire construct. The barrier shattered upon impact, fragments of enchanted ice melting instantly as gray flames licked hungrily at Lucifer's mana armor. Sweat beaded on Lucifer's forehead as he struggled to maintain the complex balance of energies within his yin-yang body. White mana surged to reinforce his right side while black mana absorbed what it could on his left. But the efficiency was waning. Each exchange drained him more than the last. Lucifer executed a rapid attack, channeling lightning through his blade as he thrust toward Jack's chest. The attack was perfect, timing, angle, power. But Jack's flames simply parted around the blade before closing again, absorbing the lightning element and redirecting it into the ground. Arthur appeared between them, moving so quickly that neither saw him until he was already there. A palm strike to Lucifer's chest sent him flying backward, while a simultaneous kick forced Jack to disengage. Arthur stood alone in the center of the battlefield, Luna's sigils now covering almost his entire body visible through gaps in Erebus's armor. "This is getting old," Arthur said, flexing his hand. The space around him warped slightly, gravity bending to his will through Lucent Harmony's enhancement of his natural affinity. Lucifer rose, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. His mana armor was fragmenting in places, the perfect balance of yin and yang disrupted by accumulated damage and fatigue. Still, his eyes burned with determination as he resumed his stance. The third movement of his art, Frozen Zenith, remained his most powerful technique. If he could land it perfectly, Jack rejoined the fray, his flames now almost completely transformed. What had started as brilliant white nirvana fire now burned primarily as gray-black abyssal flame, with only hints of white remaining. The transformation was accelerating, his true power becoming harder to conceal. Arthur raised one hand, and Lucifer's god's eyes witnessed something unprecedented. The golden sigils of Luna's mythic body began to shift and change, forming new patterns across Arthur's skin beneath the crimson armor. Some parts of Erebus's protection receded, allowing the sigils more direct contact with the air. The air pressurized around them, forcing Lucifer to his knees as gravity intensified. Even Jack struggled, his flames compressing unnaturally against the increased gravitational force. Only Arthur stood unaffected, golden sigils pulsing with each beat of his heart. Lucifer gritted his teeth, channeling every scrap of his remaining mana into his yin-yang body. The white mana formed complex supportive structures within his muscles and bones, while the black mana created points of reverse gravity to counter Arthur's field. Slowly, agonizingly, he rose back to his feet. Jack responded differently. Rather than fight the gravity directly, he fed it. His abyssal flames turned inward, consuming their own energy and creating a localized singularity. The gravity around him intensified even further, but instead of being crushed by it, he used it as a focal point. From this singularity erupted new flames, neither white nor gray but a deep violet that seemed to bend light around them. Lucifer launched himself forward, sword trailing dual energies like comets in the night sky. His god's eyes analyzed and predicted Arthur's defenses, identifying microfractures in the crimson bone armor from their previous exchanges. He targeted these weak points with surgical precision, focusing all of his remaining power into strikes that should, by all logic, penetrate Arthur's defenses. But Arthur was also evolving. With each attack Lucifer launched, the crimson armor reconfigured itself, weak points disappearing as new reinforcement grew from Erebus's deep dark reservoir. More than that, Arthur's soul resonance was expanding, the golden sigils now forming patterns that matched the incoming attack vectors precisely. He wasn't just defending, he was learning, adapting in real time. Jack's violet flames crashed against Arthur from behind, perfectly timed with Lucifer's frontal assault. A two-pronged attack that should have been indefensible. But Arthur merely smiled, raising both hands to opposite directions. The air between him and his attackers crystallized as he borrowed elements of both their techniques. Ice from Lucifer, flame from Jack, and turned them against their creators. Lucifer found himself impaled by dozens of ice shards formed from his own mana signature. They penetrated his weakened armor at precisely the points where white and black energies failed to overlap properly. Jack similarly recoiled as his violet flames contorted into serpentine constructs that turned and attacked their master, seeking the source of the abyssal energy hidden within his core. Both fighters disengaged, bloodied and reassessing. He's countering everything, Lucifer thought, his god's eyes working overtime to analyze what they'd just witnessed. This wasn't just combat superiority. Arthur was physiologically adapting to their attacks through Luna's mythic body, enhanced by his own soul resonance. Worse, he was utilizing aspects of their own techniques against them, suggesting his soul resonance extended beyond borrowing and into a form of mimicry. Jack's flames settled back into a more stable gray-white configuration as he struggled to maintain his nirvana disguise over the abyssal core. He was breathing heavily, but his eyes reflected calculated fury rather than exhaustion. Lucifer's mind raced, analyzing everything he'd observed about his opponents. Arthur's techniques, powerful as they were, required specific positioning. His god flash created multiple instances, but they existed in a defined pattern. Jack's flames, for all their destructive potential, emanated from limited casting points on his body. There were weaknesses, small, temporary, but real. The air temperature plummeted as Lucifer initiated the first phase of Frozen Zenith once more. But this time, he modified the technique, sacrificing power for subtlety. Instead of creating a dome of absolute zero, he formed thousands of microscopic ice crystals that hung suspended in the air around them, nearly invisible to anyone without his enhanced perception. Arthur noticed the change immediately, his own enhanced senses warning of the subtle manipulation. He responded by accelerating his tempest dance, moving so quickly that the air around him superheated, melting any ice crystals that came too close. Jack seized the opportunity to launch a devastating combination attack, unconcerned with the ice surrounding them. Violet-tinged flames erupted from his hands, feet, and even his mouth as he unleashed techniques that blurred the line between spellcasting and martial arts. His body became a conduit for fire in all its forms, each movement generating new flame constructs. Lucifer and Arthur found themselves momentarily allied by circumstance, both defending against Jack's overwhelming assault. Lucifer's ice crystals formed temporary shields while Arthur's crimson bone armor expanded to cover more of his body, transforming into a semi-fluid state that absorbed and redirected incoming flames. In the chaos, Lucifer observed something crucial. When Arthur defended against certain flame configurations, the golden sigils beneath his armor briefly fluctuated, struggling to adapt to the abyssal elements hidden within Jack's fire. A microsecond of vulnerability, but to Lucifer's god's eyes, it might as well have been an eternity. He altered his strategy immediately, no longer attempting to penetrate Arthur's defenses directly. Instead, he began shaping his ice constructs to mimic the specific flame patterns that caused Arthur's sigils to fluctuate. It wasn't a perfect replication. Ice couldn't truly impersonate abyssal flame, but the geometric patterns were similar enough to trigger the same defensive response. Arthur recognized Lucifer's strategy too late. As Jack continued his frontal assault with increasingly exotic flame constructs, Lucifer's ice formations attacked from behind, targeting the precise moments when Arthur's sigils reconfigured to defend against the abyssal elements. The ice penetrated, if only for an instant, creating fracture lines across the crimson armor. But Arthur was not one to be outmaneuvered for long. Even as the first fractures appeared in his armor, he adapted. The golden sigils rearranged themselves into a new configuration, one that could simultaneously counter both fire and ice. The crimson bone flowed like liquid before resolidifying in a more comprehensive protection. Jack recognized what Lucifer was attempting and, surprisingly, adjusted his own attack patterns to complement the strategy. Was it cooperation or simply opportunism? Either way, the combined assault forced Arthur to expend more energy on defense than he had at any previous point. For a brief moment, it seemed the tide might turn. Then Arthur smirked as Erebus's influence surged through the crimson armor. The fractures sealed themselves, and the bone material darkened to a deep burgundy, almost black in places as more deep dark energy flowed through the connection with the lich. "You almost had me," Arthur acknowledged, genuine amusement in his voice. Almost. With a swift, fluid motion, Arthur deepened his soul resonance with Luna. The golden sigils across his body brightened and spread further, creating more complex patterns that enhanced his borrowed mythic body. Simultaneously, he allowed Erebus greater influence, the crimson bone armor becoming more responsive, almost liquid in how it moved with his body. Lucifer's god's eyes tracked the transformation, witnessing how Arthur perfectly balanced the two energies under harmonization of lucent harmony. The golden light of Luna's sigils didn't fight against Erebus's deep dark energy. Instead, they complemented each other, creating a synergy that amplified both powers. The crimson armor flowed seamlessly with the golden sigils, creating a hybrid protection that responded instantly to threats from any direction. Arthur's eyes reflected the dual energies now fully harmonized, gold from Luna's power, and the distinctive shadowy depth of Erebus's deep dark, perfectly controlled through his soul resonance. Jack responded by finally abandoning all pretense. His flames turned into a pure gray, a complete and perfect mix of nirvana and abyssal flames. Lucifer stood between these two transcendent forces, his mana reserves critically low, his god's eyes straining to process what they witnessed. He was reaching his limit while his opponents were still ascending. The sword path begins with intent, but those who reach resonance transcend mere technique. Your sword isn't just a tool. It's an extension of your soul. When desperation strips away all pretense, when your desire to grow stronger becomes your only reality, that's when your sword might answer. He dismissed it then as philosophical nonsense. The sword path progression was clear. Intent, then focus, then resonance much later if one was talented enough. Skipping stages was impossible. Yet here he stood, depleted and outmatched, with nowhere to go but beyond his limits. Lucifer grinned as he raised his sword. Both Jack and Arthur looked at him, their eyes widening. Lucifer's sword began to sing. Chapter 353, Three-Way Battle, 3. These two are really something else, I thought, studying Jack and Lucifer as we circled each other across the shattered battlefield. As expected of the main protagonist and antagonist of the saga of the Divine Swordsman. Both exceptional in ways that defied normal progression. I flexed my fingers, feeling Luna's golden sigils pulse beneath my skin, while Erebus's crimson armor shifted like liquid across my body. My soul resonance was working perfectly, giving me access to powers that should have taken years to develop. Yet even with this advantage, the gap wasn't what it should be. I defeated Lucifer last time easily enough, but now? The thought troubled me. Even with soul resonance, the gap between us is narrowing. Lucifer had grown exponentially stronger since our last encounter. He was still behind Jack and me, enough to be gradually falling out of our fight, but the rate of his improvement was concerning. His god's eyes had evolved to track our movements despite our speed, and his control over opposing elements showed a technical precision that rivaled my own. My attention shifted to Jack, noting the gray flames dancing around his form. He was approaching something remarkable, the near-perfect fusion of his two gifts. The Nirvana flames were becoming indistinguishable from the abyssal core he'd hidden for so long. Soon, they wouldn't be two separate powers but a single transcendent gift. Getting tired, Art? Jack called out, the gray flames intensifying as he prepared another assault. I didn't bother answering, focusing instead on deepening my connection with Luna's borrowed power. The golden sigils spread further across my skin, strengthening my mythic body adaptation. Lucifer was on one knee across the field, blood running from his eyes, his dual-colored mana armor fractured in multiple places. His breathing was ragged, reserves critically low. Despite my grudging respect, I knew he'd reached his limit. Time to end this. I directed a complex gravity manipulation toward Lucifer, planning to pin him down while I focused on Jack. The attack should have crushed him completely. Didn't. Instead, Lucifer raised his sword to the sky. What happened next made me freeze mid-attack. The sword began to sing. Not metaphorically. It literally emitted a pure, crystalline tone that resonated through the battlefield. The sound vibrated through my bones, through the golden sigils, even through Erebus's crimson armor. It was beautiful and terrifying. What the hell? I muttered, genuine shock breaking through my usual composure. The fractured mana armor around Lucifer reconstructed itself. His god's eyes gleamed with newfound clarity despite the blood still streaming from them. Sword resonance, I whispered, recognition hitting me like a physical blow. Impossible. His mana rank hadn't increased. I would have sensed it. Yet here stood Lucifer, grinning through bloodied teeth, having skipped entire stages of the sword path. Round 2? He asked, voice steady despite his previous exhaustion. Before I could respond, he was in motion, not just faster but fundamentally different. His sword was no longer a separate entity but a true extension of himself. Each strike carried perfect efficiency, wasting no energy while delivering maximum impact. I barely raised my defense in time as his blade crashed against Erebus's armor. The crimson bone cracked, not just superficially but deep, structural fractures that Erebus struggled to repair. One hit had done more damage than his entire previous assault. Jack's reaction was more pragmatic than mine. He immediately unleashed his gray flames in a concentrated blast, forcing Lucifer to disengage. But rather than retreat, Lucifer's sword sang a different note, and the flames parted around his blade as if encountering an invisible barrier. They clashed again, and I found myself momentarily forgotten as Lucifer and Jack exchanged blows at a speed that strained even my enhanced perception. Jack's gray flames evolved further, the abyssal elements becoming more prominent as he pushed himself to match Lucifer's unexpected evolution. And I was suddenly the one struggling to keep pace. The realization hit me with a shock of adrenaline that coursed through my system. For the first time, I was falling behind. Soul resonance had given me a shortcut to power, borrowing strength rather than developing it organically. But borrowing had its limits. Lucifer and Jack were creating something new, something uniquely theirs. I launched myself back into the fray, pushing Luna's borrowed mythic body to its absolute limit, while allowing Erebus's deep dark energy to flow more freely through the crimson armor. The combination was powerful enough to momentarily match them again, but I could feel the strain. This wasn't sustainable. As Lucifer's singing sword clashed with my own blade, I felt the vibration travel through my weapon. There was something there, a path, a doorway, a possibility. If he could achieve sword resonance through sheer desperate will, why couldn't I? I had soul resonance. I had lucent harmony. I had Erebus. My potential should eclipse his. In the midst of combat, I reached for that same connection. My sword was already at sword intent, the first stage of the sword path. I visualized pushing beyond, forcing evolution through sheer determination as Lucifer had done. To my shock, it worked. One moment I was in the physical world, exchanging blows with Lucifer and Jack. The next, I stood in a misty realm of infinite swords. The sword path's mental world, a place I'd only heard described in ancient texts. Countless blades stretched into the distance, each representing a different understanding, a different potential future. My own sword hovered before me, glowing with golden light from Luna's sigils and wrapped in tendrils of deep dark energy from Erebus. But it wasn't enough. Intent was just the beginning. I needed to push further, to reach resonance directly as Lucifer had done. I extended my hand toward my sword, willing it to evolve, to sing as Lucifer's did. The blade trembled, responding to my desire. Golden light intensified, pushing back the mist, creating a path forward. This was it. I was special too, special like them. I would transcend normal progression. The sword began to hum, the first notes of what would become its unique song. Joy surged through me. I was doing it. A foreign blade slashed through the mist, striking my sword with brutal force. The impact reverberated through the mental landscape, shattering the fragile connection I'd established. My sword's nascent humming cut off abruptly. I caught a glimpse of the interfering weapon, not a physical sword but a manifestation of pure will. A warning, a reminder of the proper path. Reality crashed back around me as I was ejected from the mental world. My physical sword, just an ordinary blade again, was knocked from my grasp by Lucifer's singing weapon. I staggered backward, the golden sigils flickering as my concentration broke. Jack seized the opening, a torrent of gray-black flames forcing me to retreat further. Erebus's armor absorbed most of the damage, but I felt the heat penetrate to my skin. They were both outpacing me now. I called my sword back to my hand using gravitational manipulation, but the connection was gone. The moment lost. The shortcut closed. As we resumed our three-way battle, I found myself working twice as hard to keep up. Soul resonance was powerful, but it wasn't the same as natural evolution. Lucifer had found his own path. Jack was forging his through the fusion of his gifts. The realization settled in my gut like a cold stone as I deflected another singing strike from Lucifer. I had fooled myself thinking I was special like them. Chapter 354. Three-Way Battle. 4. The battlefield had become nearly unrecognizable. Craters pockmarked the ground, ice formations jutted at unnatural angles, and patches of gray-black flame burned stubbornly despite having nothing left to consume. The air itself seemed charged with residual energy, distorting perception like heat waves rising from scorched earth. Three figures stood at the center of this devastation, each radiating power in distinct ways. Lucifer's sword continued its haunting melody, the sound shifting in pitch and intensity as he moved. The pearlescent aura of his unified yin-yang energy flowed seamlessly between his body and blade, erasing the traditional boundaries between wielder and weapon. His god's eyes, though still rimmed with dried blood, tracked every movement with preternatural clarity. Jack's transformation had progressed further. The pretense of pure nirvana flames had been abandoned entirely as the gray-black coloration of his abyssal gift dominated his manifestations. Each flame construct was more complex than the last, bending light and gravity around them as they approached a state of perfect fusion between his dual gifts. And then there was Arthur. The golden sigils of Luna's borrowed power still glowed across his skin, visible through cracks in Erebus's crimson bone armor. His stance remained perfect, his expression composed. To an untrained observer, he appeared as formidable as ever. But Lucifer and Jack could see the truth. The subtle delay in his reactions. The fractional hesitation before each counter. The increased reliance on defensive postures rather than the fluid aggression that had characterized his earlier fighting. Arthur was falling behind. "Getting tired, princess?" Jack taunted, violet-tinged flames dancing between his fingers as he circled to Arthur's left. Arthur didn't respond, conserving both breath and concentration. He adjusted his grip on his sword, an ordinary blade now, without the transcendent connection Lucifer had discovered. His soul resonance with Luna was still active, still powerful, but the borrowed nature of the gift was becoming increasingly apparent as his opponents evolved organically. Lucifer attacked first, his singing sword leaving trails of light as he executed Winter's Ascent. The familiar technique was now enhanced by the resonance, each strike carrying greater power and precision as the sword song amplified the effect of his enhanced aura. The ice formations that accompanied his movements were sharper, denser, forming with an efficiency that defied conventional magic theory. Arthur countered with Tempest Dance, his sword swings gathering momentum with each successive movement. Not through footwork but through the perfect rhythm of his blade work. It was the correct strategic choice, but Lucifer had anticipated it. The singing sword changed tone mid-swing, its resonance disrupting the building momentum of Arthur's technique. Unable to maintain his Tempest Dance, Arthur was forced to reinforce Erebus's armor with a surge of deep dark energy. The crimson bone thickened just as Lucifer's blade connected, preventing serious damage but at the cost of significant energy expenditure. Jack seized the opening, launching concentrated abyssal flame constructs from 3 different angles. "Heads up!" he called, the warning deliberately timed to be useless. Arthur grimaced, recognizing the trap. Committed to defending against Lucifer, he couldn't properly counter Jack's attack. He attempted to create a gravitational distortion to deflect the incoming flames, but his control was compromised by divided attention. 2 of the flame constructs connected, searing through the crimson armor at his shoulder and thigh. Arthur staggered, momentarily dropping to one knee before forcing himself back up through sheer willpower. "Not going to make it easy, are you?" Arthur muttered, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Wouldn't be any fun otherwise," Lucifer replied. His voice strangely doubled as his sword song harmonized with his words. The next exchange happened at speeds that defied normal perception. Arthur initiated God Flash, channeling a massive burst of pure light energy into a single devastating strike. The technique had been overwhelming earlier, but now both Lucifer and Jack had adapted. Lucifer's God's eyes tracked the buildup of pure light energy, his singing sword adjusting its tone to create a counter-resonance that diminished the attack's potency. Jack's flames spread in a precise geometric pattern, creating a net that would absorb and redirect the incoming pure light. Caught between these counters, Arthur's God Flash lost much of its impact, the brilliant beam of pure light splitting and dissipating as it encountered the defenses. Arthur didn't hesitate. He committed fully to a desperate gambit. The golden sigils across his body flared brilliantly as he pushed his soul resonance with Luna to its absolute limit. Simultaneously, Erebus's crimson armor liquefied completely before reforming in a more comprehensive configuration that covered nearly his entire body. "Nirvana Chakra," Jack announced, bringing his hands together in a complex gesture. The abyssal flames surrounding him condensed inward, compressing to a point of impossible density before expanding outward in 7 distinct streams. Each stream corresponded to a different energy center in his body, creating a complex framework of power that amplified his control exponentially. The violet-black flames formed intricate mandalas in the air around him, each pattern rotating independently while maintaining perfect alignment with the whole. This wasn't just raw power. It was the culmination of Jack's understanding of his dual gifts, approaching perfect integration. Lucifer raised his singing sword above his head, the melody shifting to something more complex, more profound. The frozen zenith movement of his myth of the northern peak art remained fundamentally the same, but the sword resonance amplified every aspect. His enhanced aura, perfectly harmonized with the sword song, created a level of elemental control far beyond what he had previously demonstrated. The temperature around him plummeted instantly, crystalline structures forming in the air as moisture froze into complex lattices that resonated with the sword's song. Unlike before, where the technique created a simple dome of cold, the resonance allowed for intricate ice formations that moved and adapted with tactical precision. Arthur recognized the danger immediately. His opponents weren't just executing techniques, they were enhancing their existing abilities to unprecedented levels. Their respective evolutions had reached inflection points simultaneously. In response, Arthur pushed even harder, channeling every scrap of power he could access through his soul resonance. Golden light erupted from his eyes as Luna's mythic body and soul vision manifestations reached their peak. The crimson armor of Erebus pulsed with concentrated deep dark energy, creating a stark contrast with the golden sigils that somehow enhanced both. Godflash. A blinding beam of concentrated pure light erupted from his sword, so intense that it momentarily outshone the sun itself. This wasn't just a powerful attack. It was Arthur pushing Luna's borrowed power to its absolute limit, channeling every ounce of light energy he could access into a single, devastating strike. For a breathtaking moment it worked. The pure light beam overwhelmed both Lucifer and Jack's defenses, forcing them to divert all their power to avoid being completely obliterated. The ground beneath the beam's path vitrified instantly, turning to glass as the pure energy scoured everything in its wake. But the strain was too much. Arthur had pushed soul resonance beyond its sustainable limits. The borrowed power began to fluctuate, golden sigils flickering erratically across his skin as Luna's connection threatened to break. Lucifer was the first to recover, his god's eyes perceiving the instability in Arthur's technique. His singing sword changed melody again, creating a counter-resonance that disrupted the harmonic balance Arthur needed to maintain the pure light beam. As Arthur struggled to stabilize, Jack's Nirvana chakra reached its zenith. The 7 streams of abyssal-enhanced flame converged on Arthur from different angles, each targeting a different point where Erebus's armor showed signs of weakening. The assault was perfectly coordinated. As Arthur's pure light beam faltered, his defenses were left critically exposed. The golden sigils flared blindingly bright before fading entirely, Luna's borrowed power withdrawing as the connection strained beyond recovery. In a final desperate move, Arthur channeled all his remaining power into Erebus's crimson armor. The Lich responded, the bone material hardening to unprecedented density as it contracted around Arthur's core, protecting vital areas at the expense of mobility. It wasn't enough. Lucifer and Jack attacked simultaneously, their evolved techniques complementing each other despite their rivalry. Jack's Nirvana chakra created openings that Lucifer's enhanced frozen zenith exploited with surgical precision. The singing sword amplified Lucifer's enhanced aura, allowing it to find the minute gaps between plates of crimson armor and disrupt the deep dark energy that held them together. With a sound like shattering glass, Erebus's protection failed. The crimson bone splintered and fell away, leaving Arthur exposed and drained. He managed one final, defiant sword strike before collapsing to his knees, his blade falling from nerveless fingers. With Arthur eliminated, the dynamic on the battlefield shifted. The 2 remaining combatants separated, creating distance as they reassessed each other's capabilities. The Crown Challenge would have only one victor, and their brief alliance of convenience against Arthur had served its purpose. Jack reactivated his Nirvana chakra, the 7 streams of violet-black flame returning to their complex mandala configurations. The fusion between his Nirvana and abyssal gifts was nearly complete now, creating something that transcended either individual power. Lucifer's singing sword responded, its melody becoming more focused, more precise. His enhanced aura, perfectly in sync with the blade's resonance, flowed around him in patterns that mirrored the sword's song. His god's eyes tracked every subtle shift in Jack's stance, every minute fluctuation in his flame constructs. Arthur limped to the edge of the battlefield, collapsing against a fractured boulder to watch the conclusion. Despite his elimination, a faint smile played at his lips. There was something pure about witnessing two exceptional talents pushing each other to new heights. The final clash between Jack and Lucifer lasted nearly 30 minutes, though to observers it seemed both instantaneous and eternal. Neither could gain a decisive advantage. Each time Jack's flames threatened to overwhelm Lucifer's defenses, the singing sword would change its tone, its resonance creating new patterns in Lucifer's enhanced aura that neutralized the threat. Similarly, whenever Lucifer's sword came close to landing a decisive blow, Jack's Nirvana chakra would adapt, creating shields or counterattacks that maintained the stalemate. As sunset approached, both combatants found themselves at their absolute limits. Jack's flames had dimmed considerably, the perfect fusion between his gifts becoming harder to maintain as exhaustion set in. Lucifer's sword sang more quietly, its notes less distinct as his concentration wavered. Their final exchange was almost anticlimactic in its simplicity. Jack launched a concentrated beam of violet-black flame directly at Lucifer's center mass. Simultaneously, Lucifer executed a perfect thrust with his singing sword, aiming for Jack's heart. Both attacks connected. Jack was thrown backward by the impact of the singing sword, though his hastily erected flame shield prevented a fatal wound. Lucifer similarly staggered as the flame beam scorched through his pearlescent aura, leaving a smoking wound across his chest. For a breathless moment, both remained standing, swaying slightly as they fought to maintain consciousness. Then, as if choreographed, they collapsed simultaneously to the broken ground. Draw. Chapter 355. Three-Way Battle. 5. How incredible! Leon whispered, his eyes fixed on the massive holographic display that projected the battlefield in real time. Sword resonance at low integration rank. Your cousin is truly a monster, Lilith. Lilith's verdant eyes narrowed as she studied Lucifer's movements, the singing sword leaving trails of pearlescent light with each strike. Yes, he is, she agreed, absently twirling a strand of her golden hair. I wasn't expecting this either. Well, the one prophesied to be the next hero is special after all, Jaehyun added, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and wariness. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, as Jack's violet-black flames countered another of Lucifer's strikes with perfect precision. Mei Lin remained silent, her golden eyes tracking every movement on the screen with analytical intensity. Her expression betrayed nothing, but the slight tension in her shoulders spoke volumes. The battle continued to unfold, with Arthur clearly beginning to lag behind the other two combatants. His movements, while still technically perfect, lacked the transcendent quality that now characterized Jack and Lucifer's exchanges. He got much stronger, but it's a shame, Valerie said, the sympathy in her voice clearly directed at Arthur. She sighed, adjusting her position on the ornate viewing chair. On the screen, Arthur suddenly halted his movements, his enhanced aura visibly fluctuating as he attempted to draw more power from his connection with Luna. Is he trying to reach it? Jaehyun asked, excitement creeping into his voice as he leaned even closer to the display. Sword resonance too? Everyone in the observation chamber fell silent. Collective breath held as they watched Arthur struggle to achieve the same breakthrough Lucifer had managed. The golden sigils across his skin flared brightly, his face contorted with concentration as he forced his sword to respond. But the moment passed. The connection failed. Arthur's ordinary blade remained just that, ordinary. So he's reached that already? Magnus said, his deep voice breaking the tense silence. Around the room, faces darkened with recognition, bitter memories surfacing in each observer's mind. The aspect wall, Leon murmured, naming what they all recognized. This phenomenon appeared when one of the three aspects, body, mind, or soul, lagged significantly behind the others in development. The imbalance created a metaphysical barrier that prevented advancement until proper equilibrium could be restored. Malin's face remained stoic, but her lips pressed into a thin line. Meanwhile, Magnus stroked his chin thoughtfully, the gears of calculation turning behind his piercing eyes. On the display, Arthur fell to one knee. The golden sigils across his skin flickered and dimmed as Erebus's crimson bone armor shattered under the combined assault from Jack and Lucifer. "And that's it," Leon announced unnecessarily as Arthur's elimination became official. Third place. The battle between Jack and Lucifer continued with renewed intensity, both combatants pushing themselves beyond conventional limits as they fought for supremacy. Their clash was beautiful in its destructive harmony. Jack's flame constructs growing increasingly complex while Lucifer's singing sword answered with evolving melodies that manipulated elemental forces with unprecedented precision. Her prediction proved accurate. As sunset painted the shattered battlefield in golden light, both Lucifer and Jack collapsed simultaneously, their final attacks having neutralized each other perfectly. A draw. The Crown Challenge had two champions. "The rankings are being finalized," Jae-hyun noted as the official scoreboard materialized beside the battlefield display. 1. Lucifer Windward. 1. Jack Blazespout. 3. Arthur Nightingale.
4 Renkegu. 5 Seola Moyon.
6. Cecilia Slatemark. 7. Rachel Creighton. 8. Serafina Zenith. 9. Rose Springshaper. "As expected," Magnus said, rising from his seat with a satisfied nod. "Though I admit, I didn't anticipate a tie for first place. Are you still planning on training Arthur?" The commander of Nighthawks spoke for the first time in what seemed like hours, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Though his face remained hidden in the shadows of his hood, the weight of his attention was palpable as he addressed Magnus directly. "I am," Magnus replied without hesitation, meeting the commander's hidden gaze. "Even with the limitation he faced?" The commander probed, a hint of skepticism evident in his tone. Magnus smiled faintly, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "I cannot help with that particular wall, but I still want to train him," he said with quiet conviction. "And to be honest, he interested me even more than Lucifer and Jack through this battle." "I hope you train him well, Marshal King," Maylin said, her golden eyes reflecting the light from the display as she finally turned away from it. "I wasn't expecting the Grand Marshal of the Western Continent to ever speak like that," Magnus remarked, genuine surprise coloring his words. "Especially about someone who just lost." Maylin's lips curved into a rare, subtle smile. "I merely wish the best for him," she said, her voice softer than usual. "After all, I owe that much to him. No talent should go unnurtured." Jae-hyun joined in, leaning back in his chair with arms crossed. His eyes gleamed with something darker than mere academic interest. "In order for humanity to win, we need them all to get stronger. The coming darkness won't wait for us to sort out our internal hierarchies." Around the chamber, heads nodded in agreement, a momentary unity of purpose transcending their usual political and philosophical differences. Only the commander of Nighthawks remained still, his hooded figure motionless, as if nothing they had discussed concerned him in the slightest. I stared at the ceiling of my dormitory, counting the familiar cracks in the plaster for the 100th time. Moonlight filtered through the half-drawn curtains, casting everything in silver and shadow. My body ached, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow feeling in my chest. Third place. After being rank 1, after working harder than anyone, third place felt like abject failure. "You're being too hard on yourself?" Luna's gentle voice echoed in my mind as she manifested next to me in her cute chibi form. "Not when you were expected to win," I replied bitterly, not bothering to sit up. "Not when you felt that wall. The aspect wall. I'd never experienced anything like it before. One moment I was reaching for that transcendent connection, feeling my sword begin to respond just as Lucifer's had, and the next, an invisible barrier slammed into place, immovable and absolute. No amount of willpower or determination could breach it. Luna sighed, her chibi form shifting closer. "The wall exists for a reason, Arthur." "I know the theory," I snapped, then immediately regretted my tone. Luna didn't deserve my frustration. "I'm sorry. It's just, I didn't expect it to happen now, not in the middle of the most important battle of my academic career. Perhaps that's exactly why it happened, Luna suggested. The pressure forced you to push beyond sustainable limits. A soft knock at my door interrupted my brooding. Arthur? Are you awake? Cecilia's voice, uncharacteristically tentative, came through the door. I groaned inwardly. Social interaction was the last thing I wanted right now. I'm not really in the mood for company, I called back, hoping she'd take the hint. Too bad, came Serafina's cold, matter-of-fact tone. Open the door or we're breaking it down. Luna's chibi form flickered with amusement. You should let them in, she advised. They won't leave until you do. With a resigned sigh, I hauled myself up from the bed, wincing as my bruised ribs protested the movement while Luna disappeared. I limped to the door and pulled it open to find not just Cecilia and Serafina, but Rachel and Rose as well, all crowded in the narrow hallway outside my room. What is this, an intervention? I asked, trying and failing to keep the edge from my voice. Something like that, Rachel said, her kind sapphire eyes scanning my face with concern. She pushed past me gently, carrying what appeared to be a basket of healing herbs. Sit down before you fall down, Arthur. Chapter 356. End of Inter Academy Festival, 1. I didn't have the energy to argue as they filed into my luxurious dormitory suite. Cecilia immediately claimed the Italian leather armchair by the glass desk, sprawling in it with casual grace that somehow made the designer seat look like a throne. Her golden curls cascaded over one shoulder as she fixed me with those crimson eyes that had half the Academy's male population wrapped around her finger. Serafina leaned against the floor-to-ceiling window, her silver hair catching the moonlight that silhouetted her tall, elegant figure. Her ice-blue eyes assessed my condition with clinical detachment. Unlike Cecilia's warmth, Serafina's half-elven beauty was sharp, precise, dangerous, like the enchanted blade she wielded in combat. Rose quietly closed the door behind them before taking a position near my king-sized bed, her calm presence a counterpoint to the other's more dominant energies. Her auburn hair was arranged in a practical braid, and her warm brown eyes held their usual gentle understanding. Rachel made herself comfortable on the plush velvet couch in the corner, her golden hair arranged in a perfect cascade of curls that framed her heart-shaped face. Her sapphire eyes watched me with undisguised worry. We made an agreement, Cecilia announced, a mischievous smile playing at her lips. Just for today. An agreement? I repeated warily, lowering myself back onto the edge of my bed with its premium memory foam mattress and silken sheets, a stark reminder of how far I'd come from the village boy who'd arrived with nothing but determination. To put aside our differences, Serafina clarified. Her tone suggesting this had not been an easy concession for any of them. The subtle emphasis wasn't lost on me. Their differences largely centered around me. We decided you needed all of us tonight, not just whoever could argue their way to your door first, Rose added softly, her melodic voice carrying the slightest hint of embarrassment. The last time they'd all found themselves at my room simultaneously, the resulting argument had nearly leveled half the dormitory wing. I didn't agree to anything, I pointed out, trying to ignore the way my heart quickened at having all four of them in my space. I appreciate the concern, but this isn't optional, Cecilia interrupted, leaning forward with that teasing smile that never failed to make me nervous. We're here to cheer you up, whether you like it or not. The neckline of her blouse dipped dangerously with the movement, and I forced my eyes to remain fixed on her face. Her knowing smirk told me she'd noticed anyway. I looked to Rose, usually the most reasonable of the four. She merely shrugged, a small smile on her face. Sometimes the best medicine is knowing people care, she said simply, though the subtle flush across her cheeks suggested she was remembering our last private study session, which had involved considerably less studying than intended. Rachel moved closer, perching on the arm of the couch. Besides, she said, her melodic voice gentle yet firm, your well-being affects us all, and I won't have you suffering alone when I could be helping. I'm fine, I insisted, though none of them looked convinced. Rachel's eyes flashed with rare irritation. You're not fine, Arthur. Cecilia swiveled in the leather chair, her eyes never leaving mine. We all watched the challenge, Arthur, she said with unusual gentleness. Every hit you took, every time you got back up. Her usual playfulness had faded, replaced by something raw and genuine that made my chest tighten. It was quite the show, she added, though her usual teasing tone held an undertone of genuine admiration. Especially that last god flash. I thought you had them for a moment there. So did I admitted, running my fingers along the silken edge of the juvet. The memory of that moment, the surge of power, the brief certainty of victory, followed by the crushing sensation of hitting the aspect wall, still left me feeling hollow. I needed time to think, I added quietly, avoiding their concerned gazes. To brood, you mean? Cecilia corrected with a knowing look. Leave him be, Cece, Rachel said sharply, the rare display of temper causing us all to look at her in surprise. She moved closer to me, her slender fingers almost, but not quite, touching my arm. Not everyone processes defeat by immediately planning revenge like you do. Cecilia's eyes narrowed at Rachel's proximity to me. I wasn't, she began, then caught herself, a rare flush coloring her cheeks. Fine. But sulking won't help either. It's not sulking to acknowledge disappointment, Rose spoke up, her quiet voice carrying surprising authority. Arthur has earned the right to feel what he feels. The protective edge in her tone made something warm bloom in my chest. Serafina pushed away from the window, approaching to sit on the sleek modern ottoman near the bed, and pointedly closer to me than Rachel stood. The wall you hit, she said abruptly. That's what's really bothering you, isn't it? Not just losing, but how you lost. I met her gaze, slightly surprised by her perceptiveness. As always, Serafina cut straight to the heart of things with surgical precision. Yes, I admitted. I've never experienced anything like it before. One moment I was reaching for sword resonance just like Lucifer achieved, and the next, nothing. An absolute barrier. Rachel's eyes softened with understanding. The aspect imbalance was inevitable. The aspect wall is a fundamental limit, Rose explained, though I already knew the theory. She settled onto the plush area rug, her fingers tracing its intricate pattern. When one aspect lags too far behind the others, the imbalance creates a barrier to further progression until proper equilibrium can be restored. I know what it is, I said, perhaps more sharply than intended. What I don't know is how to fix it. You can't, not quickly, Serafina said bluntly. There's no bypassing the natural growth of aspects. Her words stung because I knew they were true. The borrowed power that had accelerated my development had now become my greatest limitation. Magnus is still going to train you though, Cecilia said, changing the subject with surprising tact. She leaned back in the leather chair, crossing her legs with elegant precision. That's what everyone's talking about. The Martial King doesn't take students lightly. I looked up, genuinely surprised. How do you know that? The commander of Nighthawks was in the observation chamber, she replied with a casual shrug that didn't quite hide her pride in her royal connections. He questioned Magnus' decision, but he was quite firm about it. Said you interested him more than the actual winners. Magnus, the legendary Martial King, still saw value in training me despite my failure. The knowledge pushed back against the hollow feeling in my chest. Don't look so shocked, Cecilia said, her fingers absently tracing the chrome armrests of the chair. Anyone with eyes could see your potential today. The wall doesn't change that. It just means you need a different path forward. A harder path, Serafina amended, never one to sugarcoat reality. Her ice blue eyes held mine steadily. But one that might ultimately make you stronger than if you'd won today. But not one you'll walk alone, Rose added, her gentle smile warming her usually reserved features. The sincerity in her warm brown eyes made my breath catch. Never alone, Rachel agreed, her hands squeezing mine with gentle possessiveness, her sapphire eyes holding a promise that made my pulse quicken. I looked around at the four of them, so different in personality and approach, yet all here for the same reason. They had set aside their differences, for tonight at least, to ensure I didn't face this moment alone. Each offered something unique. Cecilia with her fiery passion and unwavering confidence, Serafina with her steady strength and brutal honesty, Rose with her gentle wisdom and quiet dependability, Rachel with her healing touch and fiercely protective heart. Different pieces of what I needed, different facets that drew me to each of them. "Thank you," I said simply, the words inadequate but sincere. The four girls smiled together as their eyes met mine. Serafina checked her sleek platinum watch. "It's almost curfew anyway. Even with our royal exemptions, we'd be pushing our luck staying longer." They reluctantly agreed, gathering their things to leave. As they filed toward the door, their individual parting gestures spoke volumes about our complicated relationships. Cecilia approached boldly, leaning in to press a kiss dangerously close to the corner of my mouth. "Don't disappoint me by wallowing too long," she whispered, her breath warm against my skin. "I prefer you fighting." Rose's farewell was subtler, a gentle touch to my hand, her fingers intertwining briefly with mine. "Call if you need anything," she said softly, the double meaning clear in her eyes. "Anytime." Rachel lingered the longest, her eyes searching mine. "I'll come by tomorrow with proper healing herbs," she said, her voice brooking no argument. Then, she leaned forward and pressed a quick but unmistakably possessive kiss to my lips. "Rest well, Arthur." Serafina paused, turning back to fix me with her piercing gaze. "Just so we're clear," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "this doesn't change anything. You're still Arthur Nightingale. One defeat doesn't define you unless you let it." With that parting wisdom, they left, their departure as impactful as their arrival had been. When the door closed behind them, I turned to find Luna watching me as she manifested again in her chibi form. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," she replied innocently. "Just observing that for someone who just suffered a devastating defeat, you have remarkably devoted friends." The pause before the last word carried knowing emphasis. I couldn't argue with that. Their visit had accomplished what it intended. The hollow feeling in my chest had receded, replaced by something warmer, more determined. "I'm going to overcome this," I said, not as a boast but as a simple statement of fact. The wall, the defeat, all of it. I would beat them both, protagonist and antagonist of the saga of the Divine Swordsman be damned. My story wasn't written by their roles or expectations. It would be written by my will alone. Chapter 357. End of Interacademy Festival. 2. The Interacademy Festival between the 6 greatest academies in the world had concluded with spectacular displays of talent, power, and skill. Now began the true celebration. A grand festival marking the end of the formal competitions before students from the 5 visiting academies would return to their respective homes. The sprawling campus of Mythos Academy had transformed overnight. The normally sleek, modern training facilities and high-tech lecture halls now burst with colorful decorations, holographic light displays, and festive music pumping through strategically placed sound systems. The administration had arranged for vendors and entertainers from Maven City to teleport in and set up elaborate stalls along the pedestrian walkways that wound through the campus grounds. Projection drones hovered overhead, displaying spectacular light shows against the evening sky. The scent of food from various fusion cuisines filled the air, artisanal pastries incorporating mana-infused ingredients, savory street food from globally renowned chefs, intricate molecular gastronomy creations that changed flavor profiles with each bite, high-tech games of skill and chance lined the main promenade, where students tested their abilities with augmented reality challenges that were a far cry from the intense arena battles of days past. Ciola walked through it all with a detached expression, her golden eyes taking in the festivities without truly seeing them. Her black hair was pulled back in its usual severe style, though a few strands had escaped to frame her face. She wore a designer black jacket over a simple white top and dark jeans, casual by most standards, but still carrying the understated elegance that marked all members of the Moyong family. She moved with precise grace, but tonight her usual confident stride seemed mechanical. "Seal, why are you down?" Ava asked, skipping to keep pace with her friend's longer strides. Her pink-tinged hair bounced with each step, and her round face was alight with the joy of the festival. She had embraced the vacation spirit fully, wearing a brightly patterned sundress and a denim jacket decorated with pins from each of the cities they had visited during the tournament tour. You came fifth. You did very well. Siola's gaze drifted upward to the night sky, where magical fireworks shaped like mythical beasts chased each other between the stars. The world is so big, Ava, she replied after a moment of contemplation. There are so many strong people in this world. Siola had always been confident in her strength, perhaps too confident. The Moyong family had hailed her as their greatest genius in 3 generations. She had watched recordings of previous tournaments, studied the techniques of past champions, and believed she would at least come close to claiming the top position. She had trained relentlessly, pushing her body and mind beyond what most would consider reasonable limits. But the world had a way of dousing such unfounded desires with the cold water of reality. The battle between Arthur, Jack, and Lucifer had been a humbling experience. The sheer display of power, technique, and tactical brilliance had left her feeling like a child playing at combat. She hadn't even reached intent yet, while Lucifer was already at resonance with a higher mana rank and 2 gifts to her 1. Jack was equally formidable, and Arthur was just a step behind them both despite his ultimate defeat. You're being too hard on yourself, Ava insisted, her cheerful demeanor undimmed by her friend's melancholy. 5th place among all the academies is incredible. Most students would sacrifice their favorite cultivation technique for such an achievement. Would you look at that face? Came a smooth, confident voice from behind them. I've seen happier expressions on people attending funerals. Both girls turned to see Arya Gu approaching, her crimson uniform perfectly pressed despite the day's activities. Unlike Siola's severe appearance, Arya wore her dark hair in an elaborate style adorned with small golden pins that caught the festival lights. Her sharp features were set in a knowing smirk. Arya, Siola acknowledged with a slight nod. I've been looking everywhere for you too, Arya said, falling into step beside them. The Eastern Pavilion just set up a mana resonance challenge that's actually worth our time. 300 points if you can maintain the correct frequency for more than 2 minutes. Ava's eyes widened. 300? That would be enough for one of those specialty cultivation manuals they're offering as prizes. Siola merely shrugged. I'm not particularly interested in games tonight. Arya fixed her with a penetrating stare. Is this about your match with Ren? Or is it the finals that have you so morose? I'm not morose, Siola replied stiffly. You're practically radiating gloom, Arya countered. It's disrupting my enjoyment of perfectly good candy. She punctuated this by popping a brightly colored sweet into her mouth. I simply realized how far I still have to go, Siola admitted after a moment. The gap between 5th and 1st might as well be an ocean. Then learn to swim, came a deep, resonant voice that made all 3 girls turn. Lucifer stood a few paces away, his tall frame easily visible above the crowd. His golden hair caught the festival lights, creating a halo effect that seemed almost too on the nose given his reputation. His green eyes held a warmth that belied his fearsome battlefield presence. He wore dark designer jeans and a casual emerald Henley that complemented his eyes, with an expensive smartwatch on his wrist that probably contained more computing power than most students' laptops. Despite the casual clothes, there was no disguising the aura of someone destined for greatness. Beside him stood a slightly shorter young man with stark white hair and striking purple eyes that regarded the world with cool assessment. Ren, the 4th-place finisher and Eastern Prince, maintained his characteristic stoic expression even surrounded by the festival's exuberance. His casual attire, premium dark jeans, and a tailored gray button-down with subtle Eastern-inspired detailing, still managed to convey royal dignity despite the relaxed setting. Your Highnesses, Arya greeted them with a casual nod that somehow managed to convey both respect and nonchalance. Her sleek black jumpsuit and statement jewelry marked her as someone equally comfortable on fashion blogs and tournament battlefields. Ava quickly followed with an enthusiastic wave that nearly upset her drink. Siola inclined her head with just the appropriate degree of deference. No more, no less. Please, none of that tonight, Lucifer said with an easy smile. The tournament is over. Tonight we're just fellow students enjoying the festival. Even if some of you are visiting our humble academy. Some more than others, it seems, Ren observed, his purple gaze settling on Ciola with analytical precision. Ciola met his eyes without flinching. This was the man who had defeated her directly in the quarterfinals, his ice-based techniques countering her fire arts with methodical efficiency. Congratulations on your victory, she said formally. And yours, he replied, surprising her. At her questioning look, he elaborated. You fought well and honorably. That is its own victory. 5th place is hardly, she began. Do you know how many students competed across all 6 academies in the preliminary rounds? Lucifer interrupted, his tone conversational but his eyes serious. 600. You finished 5th. That places you in the top 0.83%. Statistics don't change the fact that the gap in our abilities is substantial, Ciola countered, though her tone had softened slightly. The gap is temporary, Lucifer said with the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted himself. I've watched your technique. Your foundation is exceptional, and your understanding of fire principles surpasses many instructors I know. He's right, Ren added, his usual economy of words making the statement more impactful. Your loss to me was only because of my fist intent. Ava looked between the 2 princes with barely contained excitement. Are you both actually hanging out at the festival with us? Like, actually walking around and doing festival things? Lucifer laughed, a sound that seemed to brighten the air around them. Why not? The responsibilities of princes can wait until tomorrow. Tonight is for celebration. We were actually hoping you might share which attractions impressed you most as visitors, Ren said, his formal tone softening slightly. Sometimes we take our local amenities for granted. It's valuable to see our academy through fresh eyes. Oh, you absolutely have to try the molecular gastronomy station near the Central Plaza. Ava gushed, misinterpreting his question in her enthusiasm. They use some kind of nanotech on the filling, so it hovers just above the wrapper when you take a bite. Lucifer smiled patiently. The Quantum Cuisine Lab, Professor Zhang's latest project. We eat there at least twice a week, don't we, Ren? Ren nodded. The novelty wears off after the 15th floating dessert. Ciola remained quiet, still processing the unexpected encounter with the 2 princes, one of whom had tied for first place, the other who had defeated her directly. Both were students at this prestigious academy, while she and her friends were merely visitors who would be returning home soon. And what impressed you most about our academy during your stay, Sola Moyong? Lucifer asked, his green eyes finding hers with genuine interest. The direct address from the tournament champion startled her from her thoughts. The augmented observatory on the North Quad, she said after a moment's consideration. The enhanced telescopic arrays are beyond anything we have back home. Dr. Ishikawa's pride and joy. Lucifer nodded with appreciation. I spend a lot of time there myself. The view of the Andromeda Nebula through the filter is particularly stunning. I'd enjoy seeing it again before we depart, Ciola admitted. We leave tomorrow evening. After a long week of battles and competition, it was time for the students to take a collective break and enjoy their youth together. Chapter 358. End of Interacademy Festival. 3. The final day of the Interacademy Festival was meant to be a joyous celebration. A day to unwind, revel, and build memories worth cherishing. That, at least, was the idea. Instead, I found myself entrenched in a scenario I wouldn't have wished upon my worst enemy. Rachel's arms were wrapped around mine, her expression one of quiet triumph. Her sapphire eyes gleamed with possessiveness that somehow managed to be both endearing and terrifying. Cecilia stood nearby, arms crossed and glaring daggers at a rather pale and trembling Alara. Seraphina's ice-blue eyes were fixed on the newcomer with cold assessment, while Rose stood slightly apart, her auburn hair catching the festival lights as she observed the tense standoff with quiet concern in her warm brown eyes. So here I was, flanked by 3 princesses, a daughter of a marquis, and a daughter of an archduke, caught in the midst of what looked suspiciously like a war council. What's next? I groaned internally. Tomorrow's headlines? Arthur Nightingale, young genius and prodigy, or the heart thief behind five nobles' obsession? Ridiculous. But news agencies, I reminded myself, had a unique talent for taking a modest fire and turning it into a roaring inferno if it meant headlines and profit. I wasn't naive enough to think Alara had fallen for me just because we shared a few dances or brief conversations. No, this wasn't love. But apparently, the four girls who had staked their claim on me saw even the faintest hint of interest as a threat, and they responded accordingly, like animals guarding their territory. Or perhaps like cats, I mused, imagining them with ears and tails twitching in possessive defiance. The thought amused me enough to bring a slight smile to my face. Back to reality, though. I had a tense situation to defuse. "Cecilia, relax," I said, reaching out to touch her arm. She looked up at me, her crimson eyes flashing with a vulnerability that, for a moment, twisted my heart. Hurt? Cecilia? No way. I knew better than to fall for her innocent act again. I'd fallen once before. When I didn't release my grip, Cecilia clicked her tongue, clearly annoyed that her little attempt to unsettle me had missed its mark. Meanwhile, Alara's violet eyes sparkled, her expression visibly brightening as if I'd somehow rescued her from Cecilia's scowl. A smile crept onto my face before I could stop it. There was something undeniably endearing about Alara Astoria, the kindness and sincerity that set her apart in this world. Truth be told, she was a favorite of mine even before I'd had a chance to meet her here. She was a character I'd looked forward to encountering, only to discover that fate had sent her to Slatemark Academy instead of Mythos. Still, it didn't make navigating these unexpected dynamics any easier. Alara shifted nervously, clearly sensing the rising tension. I should probably get back to my academy's gathering," she said softly. "I just wanted to say hello, Arthur. Thank you for the dance earlier." Before I could respond, Cecilia stepped forward with an overly bright smile. "Don't let us keep you," she said, her tone pleasant but unmistakably dismissive. Rose, ever the peacemaker, moved closer to Alara. "The Northern Pavilion has some lovely displays from your academy," she offered kindly. "Perhaps we'll see you there later?" The soft suggestion had its intended effect, providing Alara with a graceful exit. With a grateful smile directed at Rose and a small wave to me, she slipped away into the crowd. Serafina was the first to break the remaining tension, casting a glance my way that I knew was meant to convey the impatience beneath her calm exterior. "Arthur, don't you have plans with us today?" she asked, her tone polite but laced with subtle possession. "You promised to accompany us to the Celestial Gardens display," Rachel reminded me, her grip on my arm tightening ever so slightly. "They've brought in those rare luminescent flowers from the southern continent." "I hadn't forgotten," I assured her, though truthfully, with the tournament and its aftermath, such details had become somewhat blurred in my mind. Cecilia snorted, folding her arms. "Intrigue seems to be your natural habitat, Arthur. You don't exactly discourage it." "That's exactly what I've been saying," Rose chimed in, surprisingly firm despite her usual gentleness. "Arthur has a remarkable talent for collecting admirers without even trying." Rachel laughed softly, leaning a bit closer, her blue eyes twinkling. "Arthur doesn't have to discourage anything. Trouble finds him on its own, drawn to him like iron to a magnet." For a brief moment, the tension dissolved into laughter, lightening the mood and the air around us. I was grateful as ever for their company, even if it sometimes felt like standing at the heart of a storm. "Is it just me?" Rose questioned, her tone deliberately casual. "Or does it seem like Arthur acquires a new admirer at every festival? Don't forget that girl from Redmond City, Reka," Cecilia added with a dramatic sigh. "The one who came all the way to the Creighton estate for him when he was in a coma." "Or Callie," Serafina remarked coolly. "She went to his bedroom plenty of times." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Rachel cut me off. "At this rate, we'll need to establish a formal queue system," she declared, tightening her grip on my arm. "I'm standing right here, you know? I reminded them, unable to keep the exasperation from my voice. All 4 girls turned to me with matching expressions that clearly said, yes, and I sighed deeply. This was my life now, apparently. Arthur! A familiar drowsy voice called from behind me. I turned to see Clanna making her way toward us. Her navy blue hair slightly tousled as always, violet eyes half-lidded in their perpetual state of sleepiness. She moved with the languid grace of someone who had just woken from a pleasant nap, though I knew she had likely been up for hours. Clanna! I greeted her with genuine warmth. Unlike the complicated dynamics with the others, my friendship with Clanna had always been refreshingly straightforward. I thought you'd be sleeping through the festival. She shrugged, stifling a yawn. I tried. Too noisy. Figured I might as well see what all the fuss is about. Her gaze drifted lazily over my 4 companions, acknowledging them with a slight nod that held neither threat nor submission, just casual recognition. Interestingly, none of the girls seemed particularly concerned by Clanna's arrival. Rachel's grip on my arm didn't tighten. Cecilia didn't shift into territorial mode. Seraphina's eyes remained neutral, and Rose simply smiled in welcome. That was the thing about Clanna. She somehow existed outside their competitive dynamics. Perhaps it was her perpetual state of seeming half asleep, or the way she had never shown the slightest romantic interest in anyone, let alone me. Whatever the reason, the girls had long ago categorized her as a safe friend rather than a rival. We were just planning our route through the festival, I explained to her. Care to join us? Clanna nodded lazily. Sure. I heard there's a cloud walking experience near the central fountain. Might be interesting. I've been wanting to try that, Rose said, her eyes lighting up. They use some kind of density manipulation technology, don't they? Clanna confirmed with another yawn. Something like that. The physics is probably fascinating. But honestly, I just want to take a nap on a cloud. Despite myself, I laughed. Trust Clanna to find a way to sleep even on a cutting-edge technological marvel. As we began to make our way through the festival crowds, I felt a strange sense of contentment settle over me. Yes, my life was complicated. Filled with princesses, rivalries, and more danger than any reasonable person would willingly invite. But in moments like these, with Clanna's comfortable friendship and even the possessive but genuine care of the 4 girls around me, I couldn't help but feel grateful. Arthur, Clanna murmured as we walked, falling back slightly to walk beside me as the others forged ahead. You do realize your life is absolute chaos, right? I grinned at her. Coming from someone who sleeps through most of her classes, I'll take that as expert testimony. Her violet eyes, for once fully open, met mine with surprising clarity. Just be careful. Hearts are more fragile than swords, and you're surrounded by both. I nodded, sobering slightly at her unusual seriousness. I know, but today, I gestured to the festival around us, the lights, the laughter, the momentary peace between warring factions. Today, I think we can just enjoy the calm before whatever storm comes next. Clanna's lips curved into a rare, genuine smile. In that case, she said, I suggest we head straight for the cloud walking and find out if you're as graceful in the air as you are in battle. Is that a challenge? I asked, raising an eyebrow. More like a prediction of entertainment, she replied, eyes already drooping back to their half-lidded state. Nothing's quite as amusing as watching the great Arthur Nightingale flail about like a startled cat. As the girls ahead of us turned back, calling for us to hurry up, I shook my head with a laugh. Perhaps chaos was simply the price of an interesting life, and all things considered, I wouldn't have it any other way. Chapter 359. End of Interacademy Festival. 4. Cecilia loved Arthur. It was a truth she had finally surrendered to completely, an absolute fact that her heart would no longer allow her to deny. The realization had crept up on her gradually, then all at once, like the dawn breaking after a long night of resistance. She loved him with a ferocity that surprised even herself. The mere thought of him being harmed ignited a rage within her that burned hotter than any combat mana she had ever channeled. She loved him to an extent that frightened her. There was nothing she wouldn't sacrifice for his well-being, no line she wouldn't cross. This truth made the quiet moments like today, the final day of the Inter-Academy Festival, all the more precious. Walking beside him through the festival grounds, watching his face light up at the simplest things, feeling the occasional brush of his arm against hers. These small joys had become the highlights of her existence. "So don't annoy me right now when I am in a good mood," Cecilia said, her voice low and dangerous as she leaned against the ancient stone wall of a secluded courtyard. Her crimson eyes gleamed with barely contained power as she stared into the shadows before her. Arthur was waiting with the others, having no idea she'd slipped away for this unwelcome meeting. "That was far from my intention, Your Highness," a voice replied, so silent it might have been the night breeze itself. Her senses prickled as the man materialized from the darkness, dropping to one knee before her with practiced efficiency. Commander Matthias of the Nighthawks, the elite shadow operatives of the Slatemark Empire and one of the most formidable forces on the continent. Even kneeling, his presence carried an unmistakable weight of lethal capability. "Why did Father send you?" Cecilia demanded, eyes narrowing. "Don't you dare lie to me." Her crimson mana flared involuntarily, the physical manifestation of her gift of witchcraft illuminating the courtyard with an eerie glow. While her power posed no genuine threat to the commander, a man who had survived 3 decades of impossible missions and palace intrigues, it served as a pointed reminder of the status gap between them. Even the mighty commander knelt before the imperial princess. "He sent me here because of Arthur Nightingale," Matthias answered with dispassionate honesty, his obsidian eyes revealing nothing. Cecilia's brows furrowed deeply as her mana swelled in response, casting twisted shadows across the ancient stonework. The temperature around them dropped several degrees. "He is off limits, Commander," she stated, each word precise and deadly. "I don't care who it is. If anybody hurts him, I'll kill them, even if it's the Emperor himself." The threat of patricide, of regicide, hung in the air between them, all the more chilling for the absolute conviction behind it. Not a boast or exaggeration, but a simple statement of fact. Commander Matthias regarded her coolly, his expression carved from marble. "I wasn't tasked with hurting him, Your Highness," he clarified, his tone neutral. "His Majesty is merely interested in Arthur as the recipient of 2 very high-level civilian honors from different continents. Such recognition is uncommon." Something in his tone made Cecilia study him more carefully. The tension in her shoulders eased fractionally, her mana receding like a tide drawing back from shore. "Then what do you think of him?" she asked, having calmed considerably but still watchful. "Exceptional," the commander replied without hesitation. "His way of fighting is the most ingenious I've witnessed in decades, although his overall talent seems somewhat lacking compared to prodigies like Lucifer or yourself." "He will make up for it," Cecilia said with absolute certainty.
No.
"More than that, what Arthur lacks in raw talent, he compensates for with insight and determination that even Lucifer cannot match." Something almost like amusement flickered across the commander's features, there and gone in an instant. "If Arthur wasn't a person of importance to Your Highness, I would have considered him to succeed me in the future." Cecilia's eyebrows rose slightly. "Very high praise. That's rare coming from you," she observed, tilting her head. "Matthias, do you wish to scout him? I believe he would fit better with the Nighthawks than the Imperial Knights," Matthias admitted, his tone contemplative. "Though I doubt even the Nighthawks could contain someone like him for long." The statement hung between them, an acknowledgement of Arthur's potential that went beyond mere combat prowess or political usefulness. In a world of carefully cultivated talents and bloodline advantages, Arthur Nightingale represented something different, something unpredictable. Cecilia pushed away from the wall, her crimson dress catching the moonlight as she moved. "You're right about that," she said, a genuine smile softening her features. "No one can contain Arthur. Not the Nighthawks, not the Academy, not even the Empire itself." Matthias remained kneeling, his disciplined posture revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Understood, Your Highness," he said with practiced deference. May I be permitted to meet Arthur personally? Cecilia paused, her crimson eyes narrowing slightly. You may, she conceded after a moment. But are you planning to test him? Yes, he replied without hesitation, his honesty as sharp as the blade concealed at his hip. Don't, Cecilia said, the single word carrying the weight of an imperial decree. I don't want you to. I apologize, but that is not up to your highness, Matthias responded, his voice still respectful yet unyielding. The temperature around them seemed to drop further as Cecilia's eyes narrowed dangerously. Such an annoying bastard, Cecilia cursed under her breath, fingers twitching with barely suppressed crimson energy. You know you will be serving me soon enough anyway, right? Father won't live forever. Perhaps, Matthias replied, his face an unreadable mask. Anyway, you are dismissed. Cecilia waved her hand dismissively, biting her lower lip in frustration. Matthias bowed his head before melting back into the shadows as effortlessly as he had appeared. Today was proving to be an increasingly annoying day for her. The final fireworks of the Inter Academy Festival exploded above the island in brilliant cascades of color and light, illuminating the night sky with ephemeral constellations of human making. I stood alone on one of the Academy's many balconies, watching as crimson, azure, and gold patterns bloomed and faded against the darkness. The day had been chaotic, as most days seemed to be lately. The four girls had maintained a delicate truce throughout most of the festival activities, though I hadn't missed the subtle territorial maneuvers and possessive glances exchanged whenever they thought I wasn't looking. Only Clanna had provided some semblance of normal companionship, her half-lidded eyes and sardonic comments keeping me grounded amid the storm of noble attention. Now, as the crowds dispersed and the festival grounds emptied, I found myself grateful for this moment of solitude. The tournament was over, the celebrations concluded, and tomorrow would bring a return to the regular rhythms of Academy life. Although regular had taken on an entirely new meaning since my unexpected rise through the ranks. Impressive display, a voice remarked from behind me, materializing from the shadows as if born from them. I didn't startle, an improvement over my former self. Instead, I turned calmly to face the newcomer, though my senses were instantly on high alert. Standing a few paces away was a figure I recognized immediately, despite never having met him in person. Commander Matthias of the Nighthawks, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I wasn't aware you were attending the festival. The man's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of surprise on his otherwise impassive face. You recognize me. Interesting. He stepped forward, moonlight revealing his features more clearly. The silver at his temples, the network of faint scars visible along his jawline, the eyes that held decades of secrets. Your reputation precedes you, I replied carefully, not revealing that I knew far more about him than I should. The knowledge from the novel I'd read in my previous life gave me an advantage I couldn't afford to expose. Matthias studied me with a clinical detachment that reminded me of being dissected in a laboratory. Her Highness speaks highly of you. Cecilia exaggerates, I said, deliberately using her name without title. A small test to gauge his reaction. Nothing. Not even a flicker of disapproval. Impressive control. I don't believe she does, he countered, moving to stand beside me at the balcony rail. 2 high-level civilian honors from different continents. 5th rank at Mythos Academy despite being a first year. The personal interest of both the Magnus and the headmistress. He paused. And now, the affection of an imperial princess. I remained silent, refusing to confirm or deny anything. The night air felt suddenly heavy with more than just the lingering smoke from the fireworks. I've come to see for myself what makes Arthur Nightingale so special, Matthias continued, his voice deceptively casual. Perhaps a small demonstration? Before I could respond, he shifted. A subtle change in stance that rang warning bells in my mind. This was it, the test that would determine how the Nighthawks and, by extension, the Emperor himself would view me going forward. I don't think, I began, but my words were cut short as a wave of oppressive energy suddenly washed over the balcony. Matthias reacted instantly, moving in front of me with a speed that defied human limitations. A gun appeared in his hand, seemingly conjured from nowhere, as a torrent of viscous crimson energy, distinctly different from Cecilia's mana, crashed against an invisible barrier he had erected. "Blood magic," he hissed, his previous composure replaced by lethal focus. "Stay behind me." "Arthur," Luna said solemnly in my mind, "this is a cardinal's magic." Chapter 360. End of Interacademy Festival. 5. Blood magic. The crimson tendrils writhing through the air were unmistakable. A type of magic based on miasma instead of mana that could only be wielded by vampires and, by extension, the cultists of the Red Chalice who worshipped them. Magic that should have been extinct, relegated to history books and cautionary tales. My mind raced as Matthias stepped in front of me, his wind and dark mana wrapping around us protectively in swirling layers of midnight blue and silver. The commander's presence was like a fortress, his power radiating with controlled precision. But beneath my combat focus lurked a far more troubling question. Why? Why would a cardinal of the Red Chalice cult reveal themselves so recklessly? The world had believed vampires and their cult were completely eradicated decades ago. When I tried to expose their continued existence before, they'd gone to extraordinary lengths to maintain their secrecy, sacrificing even high-ranking members to preserve their shadows. So why now? What had changed? I didn't understand, and that terrified me more than the attack itself. "So it was you, right?" A voice boomed across the balcony, resonant with power and arrogance. The cardinal, still obscured by swirling crimson miasma, addressed me directly. "Me?" I managed, buying time as I analyzed potential escape routes. "The one who fought Vale," he clarified, his tone carrying a hint of amusement. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Vale, the bishop I'd encountered in Redmond City 3 months ago. The encounter that should have been a minor subplot in the novel's progression, but had somehow escalated into something far more significant. This means this cardinal is behind him, I thought. But the novel never mentioned a cardinal overseer for Vale's operations. Bang! The sound of a gunshot reverberated through the night air as Matthias fired. His bullets moved too fast for my eyes to track, streaks of concentrated mana that shredded through the cardinal's blood constructs with surgical precision. "As expected of the strongest Nighthawk," the cardinal said, admiration evident in his voice as he materialized from the miasma. "Your gun magic truly is on a different level." The figure before us wore elaborate scarlet robes embroidered with ancient symbols, each stitch seemingly alive with pulsing energy. In his hand, he carried a staff crowned with a crystallized drop of what appeared to be blood, buzzing with power. Undoubtedly an ancient-grade artifact. I glanced at Matthias, struck by his unwavering composure. There wasn't a trace of fear or concern in his stance. "Matthias is stronger than the cardinal," Luna's voice confirmed in my mind, her spiritual presence analyzing the power dynamics. "I don't know why the cardinal would appear here under such unfavorable conditions." That made sense. Commander Matthias was renowned as one of the strongest immortal rankers in the world, the peak of human potential before transcending to radiant. While the cardinal also held immortal rank and possessed both miasma and mana, the gap between mid-immortal and peak immortal was as vast as the difference between an ocean and a lake. The Nighthawks were unique among the Empire's forces. Users with unusual gifts that weren't traditionally powerful but instead peculiar and specialized. Gifts that conventional defense systems couldn't easily counter. Such as Matthias's gift. His ability allowed him to properly imbue mana into firearms, making him one of the few gun users in a world dominated by more traditional magical implements. Each bullet contained magic circles of staggering complexity, compressed into projectiles smaller than my fingernail. "I am not here to fight, though," the cardinal stated calmly as Matthias fired another volley at him. My eyes widened as the bullets, each imbued with 8-circle magic, all stopped midair, suspended by a single crimson thread that seemed to materialize from nowhere. A cold wave of dread washed over me. There was only one person in the entire world with this particular manifestation of blood magic. The Pope of the Red Chalice Cult. Red Chalice Cult, Matthias said, voice flat. Finally showed yourself? Well, you knew about us enough anyway. The cardinal shrugged, the casual gesture incongruous with the tension crackling through the air. My thoughts stumbled over this revelation. They knew? The Empire was aware the Red Chalice Cult survived. This directly contradicted what I'd read in the novel, where their continued existence remained hidden until much later in the timeline. My Pope gave me this magic, the cardinal continued, caressing the crimson thread with something approaching reverence. I don't believe even someone like you can break it. I agree, Matthias nodded, his gun still trained on the cardinal's heart. But they can. The cardinal's eyes widened as the space around him suddenly distorted, reality itself tearing apart like fragile paper. In an instant, he was surrounded by nearly invisible sword strikes suspended in air alongside lances of pure light that hummed with light magic. You dare in my academy? Eva's voice cut through the night with cold fury as she descended from the sky, her navy blue hair streaming behind her like a banner of war. The headmistress of Mythos Academy materialized on one side of the balcony, her presence alone causing the air to grow heavy. Opposite her, Magnus also appeared, his stormy eyes cold as winter. The Martial King's power was more subdued but no less terrifying, a contained hurricane waiting to be unleashed. Do you think your Pope's threads can stop this? Matthias asked, his gun still aimed at the cardinal's heart. No, the cardinal admitted, a flicker of genuine fear crossing his features for the first time. So I shall leave now. I will see you later, Arthur Nightingale. Eva and Magnus moved in perfect synchronization, their attacks converging on the cardinal from multiple angles simultaneously. But the crimson thread flashed once, impossibly bright, halting their combined assault for a fraction of a second. That infinitesimal pause was all the cardinal needed to slip between the fabric of reality and escape. I blinked, trying to process what had just happened, when a whispered message reached my ears, words meant only for me. I came here under the orders of my Pope. She said she liked the flower crown. I froze, my entire body going rigid as the words penetrated my consciousness. The flower crown, a seemingly insignificant detail from my previous life, a handcrafted gift I had made only once, for only one person. No, my mind spun wildly, desperately trying to find alternative explanations. The flower crown could be a code, a misdirection, a coincidence. It had to be. This world's magic systems were complex and varied, but none that I knew of could reach across the boundaries between worlds to extract memories from a past life. Yet the mention was too specific, too precise. In my previous life, before the accident, before the reincarnation, I had spent an afternoon in a sunlit park weaving wildflowers into a crown. A gift for someone special. Someone I had loved with every fiber of my being. Someone who had died in my arms on rain-slicked asphalt, her blood pooling beneath us as I begged her to stay with me. Someone who couldn't possibly exist in this world. My breathing grew shallow as I eliminated possibilities one by one, each deduction leading inexorably toward a conclusion too horrifying to accept. There was no way for anyone in this world to know about that flower crown. It existed only in my memories of a different reality, a different life. Unless, Arthur, Matthias's voice seemed distant, concerned. Are you all right? I couldn't respond. The world was tilting around me, reality reconfiguring itself as pieces of a puzzle I had never wanted to solve fell into place with terrifying clarity. Couldn't be possible. The Pope of the Red Chalice cult couldn't be her. The leader of an organization of blood-drinking fanatics. The most dangerous cardinal-level magic user in the known world. It was impossible. Absurd. A paranoid delusion brought on by combat